Palestine, the only place on earth where war is fought by civilians in jeans, flops, and stones in hand as weapons. You may wonder why the world seems silent in the wake of a war that has been deemed worse than the collective world wars. It is because it has been silenced. Imagine voicing but not being heard, communicating but there's no comprehension. That is what it's like to express to world leaders, Zionists, and war sympathizers why it is not okay to bomb children and force their way into a community. Voices from the West have been loud, clear, and extremely against the apartheid Israel. They have marched the streets adorning Kiev and demanding justice against the oppression of Palestinians, the mislabeling of the horrific acts and blockades. Pro-Palestinians have braved against Zionist governments and chanted into the crowd for the apartheid to come to an end. The call by Palestinian associations in France led protesters to gather next to the foreign embassy, chant slogans, and refute the government's stance on the occupation of Palestine, only to be fined and forced to leave their premises by the French police. When the world is forcing boycotts on multiple brands that aid Israel in funding arms, the US government is actively planning to deploy $735 million worth of bombs to Israel, with Biden also justifying the bombing of children, forcefully settling into homes and calling it their own by stating Israel has not overreacted. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is preparing a resolution to halt the planned sale of arms to Israel, with Senator Bernie Sanders following AOC to pass the bill with the U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib, American actor Susan Sarandon, and American singer-songwriter Halsey, all publicly supporting the plight of Palestinians. It seems almost criminal that Biden still blocked the UN from releasing a statement calling for a ceasefire in Gaza on 3 separate occasions. More than a dozen Americans were arrested outside the Israeli consulate in Manhattan as the traffic was stopped, slogans were held high, and chants of Free Palestine screamed loud. Bella Hadid, famous American model, publicly voiced against the Jewish force settling in Palestine and participated in marches too. In response to the model's pro-Palestinian remarks, Dior has placed a ban on working with her. Hadid was also charged with death threats, her address leaked with a warning placed to cause harm. In Athens, as the protesters gathered round in front of the Israeli embassy with vocal support breaking down all the voices of the police, brute force was expressed by the Greek security officials, firing tear gas and causing harm to the supporters. There is a growing bias among different public and private organizations in response to young Jewish Americans, occupied West Bank, the BLM movement, and now the Palestinians in Gaza. The media bias, it is being exposed, and the terminology is not being challenged. It is shifting from conflict to apartheid, from march to protest, and from occupation to settler colony, calling it what it is. The narrative is grabbing throats and highlighting the power in people instead of the people in power, and that is terrifying them. Palestinians call the freedom of expression worldwide a treasure and call for support, stating Israel is increasingly getting worried over the overflow of vocal participation and medical aid. The Israeli settler government has sent out warnings to bomb official sites, which would censor voices and stop further networking. However, it is important and extremely crucial that we do not stop, not after their warnings, not after the death toll is released, and certainly not after a ceasefire is placed. Because a ceasefire in forceful occupation is not a ceasefire to oppression.